His gardener helped him heal after divorce, then uncovered his ex-wife's dark secret. He hired her to fix his dying garden after his wife abandoned him without explanation. 8 months later, she walked into his backyard and recognized the woman who destroyed her own marriage, his ex-wife, begging for a second chance. What she revealed next would shatter everything he thought he knew about why his marriage really ended. The rain had stopped hours ago, but Michael still stood at the window of his Victoria Island apartment, watching droplets race down the glass. He'd been doing this a lot lately, standing, staring, existing in the spaces between thoughts. It had been 8 months since Rachel left, 8 months since she'd walked out of their marriage with barely an explanation, and he still hadn't figured out how to be a person again. "Mr. Michael?" A soft voice broke through his trance. He turned to find Grace, his gardener, standing in the doorway with dirt under her fingernails and concern in her eyes. She was holding a small potted plant, something green and alive that seemed almost accusatory in its vitality. "Yes, Grace?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "I'm sorry to disturb you, sir." She shifted her weight, uncomfortable. "But I noticed you haven't eaten today. The food from this morning is still on the table." Michael glanced at his watch. 6 p.m. Had it really been that long? "I wasn't hungry," he said, turning back to the window. Grace didn't leave. He could feel her presence behind him, patient and unwavering. It was one of the things he'd come to appreciate about her in the 3 months she'd been working for him. She didn't push, but she didn't disappear either. "The bougainvillea is blooming," she said quietly. "The one you said reminded you of your grandmother's house in Surulere. Would you like to see it?" Michael felt something shift in his chest. It was such a small thing, an invitation to look at flowers, but it was the first time in weeks that anyone had asked him what he wanted. "All right," he said. They walked down to the garden together, and Michael realized he hadn't been out here in days, maybe weeks. The space looked transformed. Where there had been neglect and overgrown chaos, Grace had created order. Paths wound through clusters of plants, each section flowing into the next with an artist's eye. "Grace," he breathed, stopping in the middle of the pathway. "This is... When did you do all this?" She smiled, just a little. Small, every day. Plants don't grow in one day, sir. Healing is the same way." Michael looked at her sharply. "Who said anything about healing?" "Nobody, sir." Grace knelt beside a bed of marigolds, her hands moving through the soil with practiced ease. "But I recognize someone who is trying to forget pain. I see it in how you avoid the places you used to sit with your wife. How you never go to the balcony anymore where you used to have breakfast together. That's not..." Michael started, then stopped. Because it was true. All of it. "How did you know about the breakfast?" "The chairs are still arranged that way. 2 chairs, 2 settings, you haven't moved them. You haven't moved." Michael sat down heavily on a nearby bench, suddenly exhausted. "Her name was Rachel. Is Rachel. We were married for 6 years." "What happened?" Grace asked, not looking up from her work. Somehow that made it easier to talk. "I don't know," Michael admitted. "That's the worst part. One day we were fine, or I thought we were fine, and the next day she said she couldn't do this anymore. She packed her bags and left. When I asked her why, she just said, 'You wouldn't understand, Michael, you never did.'" Grace was quiet for a long moment, then she said, "My husband left me too. 5 years ago." Michael looked up, surprised. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you were married." "Was married," Grace corrected gently. "He said he found someone better, someone who could give him the life he deserved." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I was working 3 jobs to put him through his master's degree, but apparently that wasn't enough." "That's terrible," Michael said, and meant it. "It was," Grace agreed. "But you know what I learned, Mr. Michael? Sometimes people leave not because of who we are, but because of who they are. The leaving, it tells you more about them than about you." Michael absorbed this, rolling it around in his mind like a stone. "Does it get easier?" "It gets different," Grace said. She finally looked up at him, her eyes clear and honest. "The pain becomes smaller. but you become bigger around it. You grow, like these plants. You stretch toward the sun even when you don't feel like it. And if I don't know how to do that? Grace smiled. Then you start with something small. You water a plant. You eat breakfast. You take a walk. Small, every day. The next morning, Michael woke up before his alarm. It was the first time in months. He got out of bed, showered, and went downstairs to find Grace already in the garden, her hands deep in the earth. "Good morning, Mr. Michael," she called out, surprise evident in her voice. "Good morning, Grace." He held up a thermos. "I made coffee. Would you like some?" Her face broke into a genuine smile. "That would be nice, sir. Thank you." They sat together in the early morning light, drinking coffee and watching the city wake up beyond the garden walls. Lagos was already humming with life, generators rumbling, horns honking, the distant call of street vendors beginning their daily routines. "Tell me about the plants," Michael said suddenly. "I want to learn." Grace's eyes lit up. "Really, sir? Really? I've lived in this house for 4 years, and I don't know the name of a single plant in this garden. That seems like something I should fix." So Grace taught him. She showed him the difference between the hibiscus and the bougainvillea, how to tell when the soil needed water, which plants thrived in shade, and which ones needed full sun. Michael found himself genuinely interested, asking questions, taking mental notes. "This one here," Grace said, pointing to a small, struggling plant in the corner. "I've been worried about it. It's not growing like it should." Michael crouched down to look at it. "What's wrong with it?" "Not enough light, I think, and maybe the soil is wrong. Some plants, they need very specific conditions to thrive. You can give them water, give them attention, but if the environment is wrong, they suffer." "Like people," Michael said quietly. "Yes, sir. Like people." Over the following weeks, Michael found himself spending more time in the garden. He started waking up early to help Grace with the morning watering. He learned to prune, to mulch, to recognize the signs of disease or pest damage. And slowly, almost without noticing, he started to feel a little more solid, a little more present in his own life. One Saturday afternoon, as they were working together on a new flower bed, Michael's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and froze. "What's wrong?" Grace asked, noticing his expression. "It's Rachel," he said, staring at the name on the screen. "Are you going to answer?" Michael looked at Grace, then at the phone, then back at Grace. "I don't know what to say to her." "Then maybe just listen," Grace suggested. He took a deep breath and answered. "Hello? Michael." Rachel's voice was exactly as he remembered. Soft, measured, controlled. "How are you?" I'm doing okay," he said, surprising himself with the truth of it. "What's going on, Rachel?" There was a pause. Then, "I wanted to see you. There are some things we need to discuss. Can I come by tomorrow?" Michael's first instinct was to say no, to protect himself from whatever new hurt she might bring. But then he looked at Grace, who was giving him an encouraging nod, and he found himself saying, "All right, tomorrow afternoon." "Thank you, Michael. I'll see you then." After he hung up, Michael realized his hands were shaking. "I don't know if I'm ready for this." "You don't have to be ready," Grace said firmly. "You just have to be present. And you're not alone. I'll be here, working in the garden. If you need me, just call." Rachel arrived at 3 p.m. exactly because she was always exactly on time. Michael watched from the window as she got out of her sleek black car, dressed in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Grace's monthly salary. She looked the same, polished, beautiful, untouchable. He opened the door before she could knock. "Hello, Michael," she said, and there was something in her eyes he couldn't quite read. Guilt? Sadness? Fear? "Rachel, come in." They sat in the living room, the same room where they'd once planned their future together, and now it felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. "You look good," Rachel said, and she sounded surprised. "Better than before." "Thanks," Michael said, keeping his voice neutral. What did you want to talk about? Rachel took a deep breath. I want to apologize for how I left, for not giving you a proper explanation. You deserved better than that. Michael waited. There had to be more. The truth is, Rachel continued, her perfect composure starting to crack, I was scared. I was so scared, Michael, and I didn't know how to tell you. Scared of what? Of failing, of not being enough, of you seeing me as I really was. The words tumbled out faster now. My company was about to go under. I had debts you didn't know about. I made investments that failed. I was drowning and I couldn't stand the thought of you watching me sink. Michael stared at her. So you just left? Instead of talking to me? Instead of letting me help? I know how it sounds, Rachel said, tears forming in her eyes. But you don't understand. My whole life, I've been the successful one, the one who had it all together. How could I tell you that I'd failed, that I'd lost everything? Because I was your husband, Michael said, anger finally breaking through. Because that's what marriage means. You carry each other when one of you can't walk alone. Rachel was crying now, properly crying. I know, Michael. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Michael felt his own eyes burning. You hurt me, Rachel. You made me feel like I wasn't enough, like I'd done something wrong when all along it was about you and your pride. I'm sorry, Rachel whispered. I'm so sorry. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of 8 months of hurt and confusion settling between them. Finally, Michael asked, Why now? Why come back now? Because I've been in therapy, Rachel said. And I realized that running away didn't solve anything. I still have to face what I did, face the consequences. And I owe you the truth. I owe you closure, at least. Michael nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me, for being honest, finally. Is there any chance? Rachel started, but Michael cut her off gently. No, he said. There isn't. That's not anger talking, Rachel. It's clarity. We weren't good for each other. Maybe we never were. Rachel's face crumpled, but she nodded. I understand. I hope you can forgive me someday. I'm working on it, Michael said honestly. After Rachel left, Michael sat alone in the living room for a long time. He felt hollowed out, but also lighter somehow, like he'd been carrying a question for 8 months and finally had an answer, even if it wasn't the one he'd expected. There was a soft knock on the door. Mr. Michael? Grace's voice. Are you okay? Come in, Grace. She entered slowly, still in her work clothes, dirt on her hands. I saw your wife leave. Ex-wife. Sorry. It's okay. Michael gestured to the chair. Sit, please. Grace sat on the edge of the cushion, uncomfortable with the informality. How did it go? Michael told her everything. Rachel's confession, the financial troubles, the fear and pride that had driven her away. Grace listened without interrupting, her face thoughtful. So she left because she was afraid to look weak, Grace said when he finished. That's what she said. Grace shook her head. That's sad, sir. To be so afraid of being human that you destroy something good. Were we good, though? Michael asked. I keep wondering if I missed something. If there were signs that I didn't see. Maybe there were signs, Grace said. But maybe you were too close to see them. Sometimes we need distance to understand what was really happening. Michael leaned back in his chair. Do you ever wonder about your ex-husband? If you missed signs with him? Every day for the first year, Grace admitted. But then I realized something. Even if I had seen the signs, even if I had known he would leave, I probably would have tried to fix it anyway. Because that's who I am. I try to make things grow even when the soil is wrong. Like that plant you showed me, Michael said. The one that isn't thriving. Exactly like that plant. Grace smiled. Some things, they're not meant to grow where we plant them. And that's okay. We learn, and we plant differently next time. The next few months passed more easily than Michael could have imagined. He threw himself into learning about the garden and Grace proved to be an excellent teacher. They developed a comfortable rhythm: early morning coffee, working side by side, lunch shared on the patio while they discussed which plants to add next. Michael's friends started commenting on the change in him. His business partner David pulled him aside after a meeting one day. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," David said. "You're back, man. Really back." "It's the gardening," Michael said, half joking. "It's more than that," David observed. "You seem settled, like you've made peace with something." Michael thought about that conversation later as he helped Grace transplant a row of sunflowers. Had he made peace? Maybe. Or maybe he was just learning to live with uncertainty, with the reality that some questions never got answered, and that was okay too. "Grace," he said suddenly, "why did you become a gardener?" She paused, her hands deep in the rich, dark soil. "After my husband left, I needed something that made sense. Plants, they're honest. You give them what they need, and they grow. You neglect them, and they suffer. There's no pretending, no lying, just life trying to continue." "That must have been comforting," Michael said. "It was the only thing that made sense," Grace agreed. "Everything else in my life felt like chaos, but in the garden, I could see cause and effect. I could see that my actions mattered, that I could create something beautiful from dirt and seeds in time." "You've created something beautiful here," Michael said, gesturing at the transformed garden around them. Grace smiled. "We created it, sir. Together." Michael realized she was right. This wasn't just Grace's garden anymore. It was theirs, a shared project, a shared space, a shared healing. Then one afternoon in late October, everything changed. Michael was in his study working on some contracts when he heard shouting from outside. He rushed to the window and saw Grace in the garden, but she wasn't alone. A woman was with her, tall, elegant, clearly agitated. They were arguing about something, their voices rising. Michael hurried downstairs and out to the garden. As he got closer, he realized the other woman was Rachel. "Rachel," he said, confused. "What are you doing here?" Both women turned to look at him. Rachel's face was pale, her eyes wide with something that looked like panic. Grace looked furious, her normally gentle expression replaced with cold anger. "Mr. Michael," Grace said, her voice tight, "I think you need to hear what your ex-wife has to say." "Grace, please," Rachel started, but Grace cut her off. "Tell him," Grace demanded. "Tell him the real reason you left." Michael looked between the two women, completely lost. "What's going on? How do you two even know each other?" "Tell him," Grace repeated, her voice like steel. Rachel's composure finally shattered completely. "I didn't know she worked for you. I swear, Michael, I had no idea." "Know who? Grace? What are you talking about?" Grace crossed her arms. "I'll tell him then. Your ex-wife didn't leave you because of financial troubles, Mr. Michael. That was partly true, but not the whole truth." "Grace," Rachel said, her voice pleading, "please don't do this." But Grace continued, relentless. "She left because she was having an affair with my ex-husband." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "What?" "It's true," Grace said, her voice softening slightly as she looked at Michael's shocked face. "I found out by accident. I was visiting a friend in Lekki, and I saw them together. Your wife and my ex-husband having lunch at a restaurant. They were holding hands, laughing. Rachel, is this true?" Rachel was crying now, her perfect makeup running in black streams down her face. "It wasn't supposed to happen. It started as a business thing. Daniel was helping me with my company. We spent a lot of time together, and then it became something else." "Daniel?" Michael said numbly. "Grace's ex-husband Daniel?" "I didn't know about Grace at first," Rachel said quickly. "I didn't know he had an ex-wife working as a gardener. He said he was divorced, that it was amicable, that they'd both moved on." Grace laughed bitterly. "Amicable? Is that what he told you? He left me with nothing, took everything we'd built together and gave it to his new girlfriend." "I'm not," Rachel started, but Grace cut her off again. "Not his girlfriend? Then what are you? What were you when you were married to Mr. Michael? Michael felt like he was watching this scene from outside his body. How long? He heard himself ask. How long were you seeing him? Rachel couldn't meet his eyes. 8 months before I left, I ended it after I left you. I realized I'd made a terrible mistake for everyone. 8 months, Michael repeated. The betrayal was almost too big to comprehend. You were sleeping in our bed, having breakfast on our balcony, saying you loved me, and all the while, I did love you, Rachel said desperately. I do love you. That's what made it so confusing. I loved you, but I was attracted to him. He made me feel alive in a way that... She stopped, realizing what she was saying. In a way I didn't. Michael finished. His voice was completely flat now. The financial troubles were real, Rachel said, as if that somehow made it better. Daniel was supposed to help me save the company, but he just made things worse. When I finally realized what was happening, what I'd done, I panicked. I couldn't face you. I couldn't tell you the truth, so I lied. I took the coward's way out. Michael looked at Grace. How long have you known? That she was your ex-wife. I figured it out about a month ago, Grace admitted. I saw a photograph in your study, one you'd forgotten to put away. I recognized her immediately, but I didn't know what to do with that information. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't want to hurt you more than you'd already been hurt. So why tell me now? Michael asked. Because she showed up here, Grace said, pointing at Rachel. She came to the garden asking for me, said she needed to talk to me, and when I asked her what she wanted, she said... Grace's voice cracked slightly. She said she wanted my blessing to try again with you, that she'd broken up with Daniel, that she realized you were the one she really loved, and she wanted to know if I would step aside. Michael stared at Rachel in disbelief. Step aside? Grace works for me. She's my gardener. Why would she need to step aside? You need to step? Rachel's face went even paler. I saw how you looked at her, how you talked about her to your friends. David told me you'd been spending all your time with your gardener, that she'd helped you heal. I thought there was something between you. So you came here to what? Assert your claim. Make sure your backup plan was still available. No, I came because I realized I'd made the worst mistake of my life. I lost you, Michael. And then I lost Daniel too, because he was exactly what Grace said, a user, a liar. And I thought if I could just talk to you, explain everything, maybe we could start over. Start over? Michael's voice rose for the first time. You betrayed me with someone else's husband. You lied to me for months. You made me think I was the problem, that I wasn't enough when all along you were the one who wasn't committed. And now you want to start over? I was wrong, Rachel sobbed. I know I was wrong. I've been in therapy. I've been working on myself. I'm a different person now. Good, Michael said coldly. I'm glad you're working on yourself, but you need to do that somewhere else, far away from me. Michael, please, get out, Rachel. Get out of my house, get out of my garden, and don't come back. But now, Rachel, before I call security. Rachel looked at him, then at Grace, then back at him. She must have seen something in his face that told her there was no going back, no second chance. She gathered her purse and walked slowly toward the house, her shoulders shaking with sobs. At the gate, she turned back one last time. I'm sorry, Michael, for everything. Michael didn't respond. He just stood there, watching her leave for the second and final time. After Rachel's car disappeared down the street, Michael and Grace stood in silence. The garden felt different now, tainted somehow by the scene that had just unfolded there. I'm sorry, Grace said finally. I should have told you sooner. No, Michael said. You were trying to protect me. I understand that. I saw you healing, Grace said. I saw you getting better day by day, and I didn't want to be the one who opened that wound again. Michael thought about that. You know what's strange? I thought finding out about the affair would destroy me, but I actually feel relieved. Grace looked at him in surprise. Relieved? They sat together in the garden as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Around them, the plants they'd nurtured together swayed in the evening breeze, proof that life continued, that growth was possible, that beauty could emerge from dirt and pain and time. "Grace," Michael said after a while. "Yes, sir?" "Thank you. For being here. For being honest. For creating this space where I could heal." Grace smiled. "You created it too, Mr. Michael. We both did. Can I ask you something?" "Of course." Rachel said she saw how I looked at you, how I talked about you. Michael paused. Was she wrong? Grace was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "I don't think this is the right time for that conversation, sir." "You're probably right," Michael said, but he was smiling a little. "But maybe someday?" "Maybe someday," Grace agreed. "When we've both finished healing, when we're both ready to plant something new." 6 months later, the garden was in full bloom. Michael had learned the names of every plant, understood their needs, could spot disease or stress at a glance. He'd become a proper gardener, working alongside Grace as an equal rather than a student. They'd also become something more than employer and employee, though they were taking it slowly. Coffee had turned into dinners. Dinners had turned into long walks along the beach at Bar Beach. Long walks had turned into shared dreams and plans for the future. "I'm thinking of expanding the garden," Michael said one morning as they worked together on a new bed. "Maybe take over that corner by the fence." "What would you plant there?" Grace asked. "I was thinking roses. My grandmother used to grow roses." "Roses are good," Grace said thoughtfully, "but they need a lot of attention. You have to be committed." Michael stopped working and looked at her. "I'm committed," he said, and he wasn't just talking about roses. Grace met his eyes and smiled. "I know you are." They went back to work, their hands moving in the soil, creating something new together. Above them, the Lagos sun shone warm and bright, and all around them, life pushed upward toward the light, persistent, resilient, forever reaching for growth. Michael's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a text from David. "Lunch today? Need your advice on something." "Work?" Grace asked. "Friend," Michael said. "But yeah, he probably needs advice." He typed a quick reply, then put the phone away. "I'll be back in a couple hours. Will you be here?" "Where else would I be?" Grace said, smiling. "This is my garden too." "Our garden," Michael corrected. "Our garden," Grace agreed. As Michael walked toward the house to get ready, he paused and looked back at the space they'd created together. It was more than just a garden now. It was proof that endings could become beginnings, that pain could transform into beauty, that the people who help us heal might be the ones we least expect. He thought about Rachel and realized he felt no more anger toward her, just a distant sadness for the person she'd been, the mistakes she'd made. She'd moved to Abuja, David had told him, started over somewhere new. He hoped she found whatever she was looking for. But for Michael, everything he needed was right here, in this garden, in this moment, with this woman who'd taught him that healing wasn't about forgetting the past or erasing the pain. It was about making space for something new to grow. "Ready?" Grace called out. Michael smiled. "Ready," he said. And he was. 1 year later, on a Saturday afternoon in June, Michael and Grace stood together in the garden surrounded by friends and family. Pastor Adalik from the church down the street led them through their vows as the sun filtered through the trees overhead. "Do you, Michael, take Grace to be your wife?" "I do," Michael said, his voice clear and certain. "And do you, Grace, take Michael to be your husband?" "I do," Grace said, her eyes bright with tears. They exchanged rings, simple gold bands that caught the light, and kissed as everyone cheered. The reception was held right there in the garden, at tables arranged among the flowers they'd planted together. David gave a speech about how Michael had transformed over the past 2 years, how he'd become more present, more alive. "I once asked him what changed," David said, raising his glass. "He told me he learned to garden, but I think he learned something more important than that. He learned that sometimes you have to let things die before new things can grow. He learned that healing takes time, takes patience, takes getting your hands dirty. And he learned that the best things in life often grow in unexpected places. Everyone drank to that. Later, as the party wound down and the stars came out overhead, Michael and Grace stood together at the edge of the garden looking at everything they'd built. "I never thanked you properly," Michael said. "For what?" Grace asked. "For seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for being patient while I figured out how to be a person again, for teaching me that endings aren't always the end." Grace leaned her head on his shoulder. "You taught me things too." "Like what?" "That it's okay to trust again. That not all men are like Daniel. That love doesn't have to be complicated. Sometimes it can just be two people, working side by side, growing something beautiful together." They stood there in comfortable silence, surrounded by the results of their shared labor. The garden was exactly what Grace had promised it would be, a place of healing, of growth, of life pushing forward no matter what. And somewhere in the city beyond their walls, Rachel was living her own life, learning her own lessons. Michael hoped she found her peace just as he'd found his. Michael laughed and let her lead him back to their friends, to their family, to their future. Behind them, the garden rustled in the night breeze, alive and thriving, a testament to what could grow when you gave broken things time, attention, and love. In the end, Michael thought, that's what saved him. Not the leaving or the betrayal or even the truth. What saved him was learning to put his hands in the dirt and trust that something beautiful could still grow, even in soil that had known pain, especially in soil that had known pain, because that's where the strongest roots take hold. The end.